What's up, guys, and welcome to week 15 of Flex Friday. Andy and I are coming at you for the playoffs. We got some music. I'm trying to figure out how to use it, so bear with us as I click all of the things at once. But Andy, nice to see you today, man.
It's good to see you too, man. It's good to be in the playoffs. You know, it's the best time of year. You know, it's the draft, and then the season's great, but there's something magical about the fantasy football playoffs. And happy that, you know, most of my leagues we squeaked in some of them, got a bye, so I'm just no stress this week. But you know, you still want to be looking ahead. It's a beautiful time of year.
Yeah, 100%, man. The playoffs. I feel like the longer I've played fantasy football and the more leagues I've got, like the regular season kind of just feels like we're getting to the playoffs because I've been through it, right? It really does feel like that. I also would just like to do a quick shout out and a condolence to my friend Jake, who left and got knocked out of the playoffs due to a -2 stat correction for Jared Goff. I know we all saw that go through on Thursday. They initially basically had blamed the fumble on the center. They then blamed it on Jared Goff. And so double check if you are even in the playoffs in your league, if you got bumped out. But just for fun today, Andy and I are going to do a tiny segment just before the intro of some guys that may be on your waiver wire that could maybe help you for next week or the championship week of your dynasty or most likely redraft. This is probably less dynasty forward, but Andy, give us a couple names that people can look out for on their waiver wire that could maybe win their league or just influence the outcome moving forward.
Yeah, for me, I mainly looked for just next week. You know, maybe you have a first round bye, or you know, it's like really getting to the championship game. That's what you got to do to have a shot. So first guy up, Aaron Rodgers. Nobody thought he was going to come back. There's a chance he plays week 16. If he does, he gets the Commanders, allowing the second most points to quarterbacks. He's a Hall of Famer. I'm not worried about any sort of cobwebs or him being out of the game. He's like John Wick on a mission to do the impossible. And honestly, watching him come back from injuries and fight to get through it so many times in his career, I would not be surprised if he does. So throw him on your roster if you got a spot. Up next, I got the Broncos D, who still susceptible to the run, but they're forcing turnovers. They're playing a lot better against the pass. They're only rostered in 29% of leagues, and they are averaging the second most points per game. They get to play the Patriots and the Chargers week 16 and 17 at home in Denver. Then following, I got Kenny Gainwell. You know, not really looking to start him if Swift is healthy, but if he gets hurt, Kenny Gainwell should be the guy, and he plays the Giants in Arizona week 16 and 17. So that could be a league winner if something happens to Swift. And then finally, Darren Waller, hopefully coming off IR this week, but if not for the next weeks, he plays the Eagles week 16, which, you know, they're allowing 10 points per game to tight ends and are 32nd best DVOA versus that position. So if you've been streaming, he could be a guy that could instantly upgrade you at the position.
Yeah, I love all those as well. For me, my defense is going to be the Rams. They play Washington this week, who basically, I don't know if they lead the league in like sacks given up, but I know Sam Howell has been getting sacked at a crazy high rate. And that's kind of what I'm thinking for the Rams here, right? If they can get some sacks, stack up some DST points. And if you have to, I mean, New Orleans next week and Giants the week after, that's the Rams schedule for the next 3 weeks. Those are all pretty good matchups. So if you had to play them, I think you could play them all 3 weeks. My Darren Waller-esque guy is going to be Michael Thomas. He was pretty solid to start the season. I'm not saying he was a league winner, but this guy could easily be sitting on your waiver wire. Maybe you just slot him in at flex if you've lost some players to injury recently. RB-wise, I'm going to go someone that I think is a little deeper, but kind of fun if it happens to play out this way. And that's going to be Patrick Taylor of the Packers. Yeah. He looked pretty good. I mean, he only had like 4 or 5 touches last week. He had 6 PPR fantasy points with those touches, brought in both catches for 22 yards, I think. But here's the thing. Aaron Jones hasn't played in a long time. There's no promise that he does come back. Maybe he's still banged up. A.J. Dillon, broken thumb now. So this is kind of just for all we know, Patrick Taylor may be the only guy next week I'm not saying it's going to happen, but it's within the realm of possibility. And then my last guy is going to be Michael Wilson, someone who I've been really bummed has kind of just missed a lot of games due to random injuries. But I think for me, if he comes back and plays, there's a chance that he just leads this wide receiver core. As much as I do like Hollywood Brown, he definitely hasn't taken charge. And that's the thing is I wouldn't say he has a stranglehold on the number one wide receiver for the Cardinals. So who knows? Maybe Michael Wilson plays this week and he drops 8 for 102 and a touchdown, and all of a sudden you find yourself playing him next week. So to everyone, just be on the lookout for those guys. You never really know. Something I like to do on Sleeper at this time of year, especially of a bye, because you're able to look a little more forwards than having to worry about this week specifically, is just go to preseason ADP and just see if someone's still on the waiver wire that you're oh, that's right, that dude's just been hurt and no one picked him up, or random things like that. Sometimes just sorting the stats correctly can really help you find these guys. So stay tuned after the intro, guys, for our normal Flex Friday for week 15, the first week of a majority of fantasy playoffs. Okay, Andy, so get us kicked off with your first Flex Friday guy for the fantasy playoff. Andy and I are going to go a little different. We may do some guys that are right more on that cusp, and it's going to be a little more start city, but let's just get these guys in your lineup if you're able to. So who's your first guy, Andy?
Yeah, so, I am coming at you with a 2-for-1 to start out, so maybe a little more value here. I'm going both Tyler Lockett and Jaxon smith-njigba. Playing on Monday night, there's nothing better in the fantasy playoffs than having a guy who can help you win a comeback on Monday Night Football. Seahawks are taking on the Eagles. Geno Smith's probably coming back, and the Eagles have allowed the most points to wide receivers by a lot. They're averaging over 4.1 more points per game to the position than the 31st best team against it. And they've also been solid against wide receiver ones, though. Doesn't mean to sit DK, but the 30th DVOA and 23rd DVOA versus wide receiver 2s and 3s. And I think there's going to be more opportunities for both of these guys. JSN's been getting more and more involved. He should have had that touchdown against Dallas that they overturned. I still think that was a touchdown catch. Recent stats might not look as great, but, he's been playing really well. I would play Lockett over JSN if I had them both, but it's a 48.5 point over-under, and they both should get plenty of opportunities against, a defense that has struggled against that position.
Yeah, I like it. I mean, Eagles, I think they're going to come out pissed, to be honest, and probably put some points up. And they may crush Seattle, which could be awesome for the wide receivers. I would probably be a little more tentative with the Seattle running backs because I just think that this game could get rough. But just like you said, question for you with those wide receivers. Let's say you're sitting on someone like Rashid Rice. Would you play the Seattle guys over Rashid Rice, or would you be leaning someone more in that area of the rankings? Because that's probably a pretty legitimate area that you'd be in is, hey, I picked up Rashid Rice. He's been awesome. Do I just stick with it, or do you think the Seattle guys are in a better place? Yeah.
Remind me, who are the Chiefs playing again this week?
The Chiefs are playing New England.
I like Rashid Rice, but I feel like I'd probably play Lockett over Rice. I don't know if I'd play JSN over Rice, but I feel like that's where I would slot him in between those two guys.
Yeah, just interesting. I wasn't trying to put you on the spot or anything.
Fair enough,
but those are the decisions, man. We're all having to make it. So my first guy for this week, it's going to be another wide receiver, and I'm going to go Odell Beckham Jr. Night game, Sunday night against the Jaguars. Maybe I just like things coming down to the wire, but the tiebreaker for me is always night games because I just like the ability to have the last guy going. I really do. But, Odell exploded last week. He looks awesome. He looks healthy. And I think I'm just going to bet on this Baltimore passing attack moving forward and hope that they can just stay hot. That's really it. Like, Lamar looks amazing. And I think Trevor Lawrence, he's going to be playing. And I think there's just going to be some throwing on Sunday Night Football. And OBJ is really their deep threat. I mean, Flowers has looked amazing too. And they're just coexisting very well together.
Yeah, I mean, especially without Mark Andrews, there's a lot more targets that can go around to the wide receivers in this offense. OBJ had 10 targets in the last game. Had a great stat line, like 90 yards and a touchdown. Jags giving up the 7th most points to wide receivers, and what should be a high-scoring game. Yeah, I like this play.
Yeah, and I mean, you take out the one game basically against the Chargers, and OBJ's been over 10 points in 4 out of 5 games. Like, that's pretty solid, and he's still probably ranked a lot lower if you're going on a site. So I definitely think a lot of teams could be sitting on Odell on their bench, and I think this is the time to put him in. So who's your second guy for Week 15?
Well, going up next, we got probably our favorite player now of all time. I think we both need to get jerseys, maybe matching tattoos, but I'm going Rashid Shaheed.
Rashid Shaheed.
Let's go.
Love you, buddy.
Yeah. So, playing the Giants this week, they're coming off a big win against my Packers on Monday Night Football. I don't really expect that win to propel them. Sometimes you get up big for a game, then maybe a letdown spot this week. Playing in New Orleans on a short week for the Giants, Rashid should be coming back to that beat-up pass-catching room. Giants giving up the 4th most points to wide receivers. Somehow pretty good at DVOA against wide receiver 2s and 3s, but where they really struggle, they give up their 6th worst to deep passes over the middle. That's where Rashid Shaheed eats on those deep posts. He's got the speed. I think he's going to get a lot more targets coming back. I think there's a lot more trust in him. Heck, Carr's out here handing him a Rolex. I think that means it is time to put him in your lineup. So I think he gets the job done.
Yeah, and when it comes to the playoffs, man, Shaheed is that perfect guy that if you're the 6th seed going up against the 3 seed, that's really freaking good. Sometimes you kind of just got to bite the bullet and you're like, yeah, Antonio Gibson might get the start, but Shaheed can drop 25 if he catches it. And sometimes you got to just go for it. I love the call, man. I will be pulling for Shaheed this weekend as he is one of my favorite players. So my running back I'm going to go with for Flex Friday, Week 15 is going to be Ty Chandler. Alexander Mattison ruled out. I'm not really going to go over too much of Chandler's stats because they've mostly been with Madison. So I don't really think we've seen him alone.
Yeah.
But, he's basically been 2 for 4 splitting with Madison. He's had 2 good games, 2 bad games, but that's at like a 50% or lower snap share. I'd expect him to be closer to 60, 65%. I bet Guanu, I don't know the exact pronunciation of the guy who's probably going to slot up. But I think Ty Chandler against Cincy should be a close game. Vikings going with the quarterback change. So let's see how they operate their offense. But it does look like Justin Jefferson's going to be back. And I think this is just a touches one. I think Chandler's going to be involved. And it would be pretty hard to get away from him unless you were super deep at running back.
No, for sure. I'm really happy. Picked him up. He was one of my guys a few weeks ago. And if I remember, he didn't have a super great game. He did okay, but kept him on the roster, and I'm looking forward to starting him this week. Bengals 27th DVOA versus the run, and kind of like you said, with those kind of QB position in flux where they're like, we really don't know who to start, and you've got to assume that they're going to want to run the football, even with Jefferson back, that he's for sure going to get touches. So
I like it. So the last one of the week for you, Andy, who are you going with?
So here we got another 2-for-1, and this is Jaylen Warren and Najee Harris. They're splitting touches fairly evenly. It seems like Najee's getting a few more carries where Warren's getting a few more targets. Playing the Colts, who are allowing the 4th most points to running backs, 26 DVOA versus the run. FTN Fantasy has them at 12th DVOA versus pass-catching running backs. But they just allowed 126 receiving yards to the Bengals running backs last week. So they are still definitely susceptible in that way. The Steelers struggling against the Pats, back up against the wall. Mike Tomlin's such a good coach. I feel like they're going to be pulling out a lot of stops this week, and the team's going to be fired up and ready to bounce back. And I think both guys should have lots of opportunities in this one.
Yeah, I'm definitely kind of torn with you. I think the matchup is good. It really just depends on who you're sitting on, right? Like, I think the Steelers guys have been pretty good. I think there's going to be some points scored in this game specifically. And with Trubisky still playing, that's just kind of, they're probably going to hand the ball off. I definitely would go Najee over Warren. I think after the offensive coordinator change, I'm with you. It just seems like Najee's been a little more involved, which is a bummer. I loved watching Warren become more involved.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that plays out. My last guy for the week is actually going to be a Pittsburgh Steeler as well. This is the guy that I'm going to throw. He's my Rashid Shaheed for the week, whatever. My late guy, or just a high upside play that hasn't really been great or done much recently. That's going to be George Pickens. Pickens has been pretty crap for honestly 5 or 6 weeks. It's been rough with Trubisky in there. Trubisky hasn't looked too great. He did have an okay fantasy game last week because he ran one in, but that's kind of like fake, that's not passing stats. But Indy, to start the season, had kind of given up a lot of points against wide receivers. They've been a lot better recently, but to be honest, I think some of those stats, if you look at them, are a little more deceiving than you'd think. It's like, yeah, they've been pretty good against the pass recently. Who have they played? The Panthers, the Patriots. I think it's just like, I don't think that's fully there. And I think this game's in Indy. It's inside. And Pittsburgh, I think they're going to throw. And I just think this might be the game that Pickens he gets another TD. And if you're having to reach for the ceiling, I think Pickens, Shaheed, you can pick one of these guys up and throw them out there and just hope that they have one of those blow-up games.
No, yeah. And, to kind of go along with that, Indy 29th DVOA versus wide receiver twos. They've fared fairly well against ones this year, but that's where they've struggled. I think Pickens is pretty solidly the two. They've also struggled deep left, deep over the middle. And it seems like Deontay is, still a little bit more of a shorter route guy, and Pickens is more of a downfield guy. So he can attack them where they're weakest as well, despite also being just a big, physical, fast freak of nature. So,
yeah, it is sketchy, though. I got to say, I don't feel great about this one, but I was just trying to pick a player that's someone like, for all we know, maybe you lost. Like, you had Keenan Allen, you'd been playing him all year, and you're like, dude, do I pick up whatever, or do I just put Pickens in? I was like, I think you're going to go Pickens here. So, who are going to be your streamers for the week? Let's start with our tight end.
Yeah, well, with the last guys we were talking about, it was like, our guys, when you're down, you got to shoot for the moon with that high upside. I think that's really important for the playoffs. But I think what's also important is to start your studs when you have them. And my tight end, he's only being started in like 30% of leagues right now, and he is a stud, and that is Trey McBride. He's got a real tough matchup this week. They're playing San Francisco, which are allowing the 4th fewest points to tight ends, 2nd DVOA versus the position, great defense. But if you had Justin Jefferson and he's healthy, you're not going to bench him no matter who he's playing. Trey McBride, not quite at that level, but he has been phenomenal the last 8 weeks. He is tight end 4 in points per game since he became the full-time starter in week 8. And let's see here. And in that span, 2nd in receptions, 3rd in targets, and that's including a bye week. So he's been getting so much volume, so much opportunity. He finishes the tight end 3 and the tight end 7 different weeks without scoring a touchdown. I mean, he has just been incredible. He's almost like the wide receiver 1 on that team, and he's a tight end. So don't be afraid of the San Francisco matchup. Play this guy. Ertz had 6 catches for 53 yards against the 49ers when they played earlier in the year before McBride was the guy. McBride at this point in both of their careers is definitely the better athlete, the better tight end. So there's still going to be lots of opportunities for him. So don't leave him on your bench unless you have like Laporta or Hawkinson or someone who is also an absolute stud.
Yeah, and I think this is a good situation and a good thing that you're kind of talking about. I think some people may be deciding between McBride and, let's say, Dallas Goedert. Let's say you've been rostering Goddard, you picked up McBride in the meantime.
Yeah.
I think I'd probably pull the trigger on McBride. He's just been more of an elite top end. And like I started the show off today, I said no wide receiver has really thrust his way to the top of that Cardinals passing game. Do you want to know why? It's because Trey McBride has. He's the number one target right now on that offense. And you could just tell, I loved, 2 weeks ago, because they were on bye, when he got that TD called back and Kyler just went right back to him and he got the touchdown. I was like, I love seeing that because it shows the trust that he's like, nah, man, I'm getting you your TD and we're going to get this. So
yeah,
my tight end for the week, he's going to go someone who just came off his best game of the year, basically his best game of the career, but that's going to be Isaiah Likely. I'm double dipping on this Baltimore Ravens passing game. 5 catches for 83 yards and a long touchdown last week against the Rams. Jacksonville, definitely a bottom third team against tight ends. They've gone pretty well against Jacksonville. And I just think Likely looks more comfortable. He looks like he's had a couple games with Andrews out, so Lamar trusts him a little more. And he definitely is a weapon from tight end. He's got some catch or some run after the catch ability. So I just don't really see, with as hot as the Ravens passing game is right now, how you can get away from Flowers, OBJ, Likely. I'm running all of them out Sunday night, and I'm just putting it on Lamar, man. The dude looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL right now.
Yeah, they're on such a hot streak, and sometimes you got to just play the hot hand. I mean, they're one of, if not the team to beat in the AFC. 7 targets for Likely, was the tight end 4 last week. Like you said, Jags giving up 5th most points to tight ends. And I think, as he gets more and more of those first team practice reps, he's going to get involved more and more in the offense. So, yeah, I think you could do a lot worse than him this week.
I cannot wait and honestly, this is going to impact probably every single fantasy matchup in week 16, but Baltimore, San Francisco, that game is going to be absolutely nuts. And that could be a Super Bowl preview, man. It really could. So I'm very excited for that one. So who are you looking at for QB this week, Andy? And let us know what kind of decision you make. Are you going more like a top end streamer or a guy you're picking up off waivers?
So this guy, he's probably available in some leagues, but a lot, he's also only started in 30% of leagues. And, this is Russell Wilson, who has a great matchup against the Lions. That offense has been cooking. I'm sure Dan Campbell's got the Lions after, losing pretty bad, doing the Oklahoma drill, practicing the subtle art of kneecap biting. But there's still a lot of opportunities to exploit this defense. They've allowed the most rush yards to quarterbacks. And, Russ has shown, even though he's 34, he's still willing to get out there and scramble. He's ran for over 300 yards this season, which gives him a nice baseline. If that opening's there, he's going to take it. I feel like the Lions are going to come out firing on offense. And they've also given up the 9th most points to wide receivers. So they're susceptible from the quarterback running. They're susceptible to him throwing. And, he's really been going to his wide receivers. Shout out Cortland Sutton, who's been having a great year. So I think he can get it done on the ground. I think he'll have opportunities passing. It's like, in one league, I've got like Russ, and then I have Justin Fields, who's playing Cleveland. And, with that decision, it's like, I am going to start Russ. I feel like he's safer, and there's still a ceiling for him to hit. So,
yeah, I mean, that is a tough decision, and that's really a know your team kind of situation. Are you projected to win? Are you projected to lose? And these are kind of the minute decisions that you do have to make in fantasy football that I think people from the outside tend to like overlook or like tease about. And you're like, no, like, why are you so stressed about this? Because you don't know what I'm having to decide. Like, you don't know the decisions I'm making. I like it, dude. I think the Broncos look pretty good. I think they're one of those teams that if they sneak into the playoffs, I'm not picking them to win the Super Bowl or anything, but they're not going to be an easy out. They're not going to be an easy out. You would much prefer to play someone else, I think, especially in like the wild card matchup or something. Another note, dude, Sutton looks like the guy from like 2-3 years ago that we all thought was really good. He hurt his knee. Then he kind of, he just kind of had those off years and we kind of forget. And everyone was so hyped about Jerry Jeudy, but Cortland Sutton's the guy there. It's not Jeudy. Judy's got to be gone after this year. So
yeah.
The guy I'm going to go with is going to be Matthew Stafford, home against Washington. This is just another guy kind of in that similar range as Russ. Stafford's just been great, man. QB7, QB8, QB5 over the last 3 weeks.
Huge.
Like those numbers, like you can't really lie. And like, you know, you could say like, oh, well, maybe he's just had easy matchups. It's like, well, Arizona, that's a good matchup, but Cleveland and Baltimore, like those are not easy matchups. So QB5 last week against Baltimore, I just think Kupp looks a little healthier. His ankle seems to have healed up a little bit. Puka looks like just a stud. Man, that dude is he is just a good wide receiver. He was not a flash in the pan or whatever you want to call it early season. He's legit. He's made some big plays. Yeah. And I think I'm just going against Stafford in an easier matchup against Washington. I think he's going to throw for some touchdowns, probably at least 2. And I definitely would play Stafford over the likes of Tua, Kyler Murray, Jared Goff. Those are 3 names that I think are decisions you may be made, and that's where I would stick him in my rankings. I think Tua is a really good quarterback, but he just hasn't had that elite upside recently. Tyreek Hill may not play, and the Jets defense is pretty good. Same with Jared Goff. I think Jared Goff he's a solid quarterback. Tough matchup. And Kyler against San Fran. You know, Trey McBride can still have a great game without Kyler doing well. Those do not have to be like the same thing. So that's just kind of a decision that if I was in that position, I would go Stafford over those guys.
No, I'm with you there. Washington allowing the 2nd most points to quarterbacks. So if he can get it done against the Ravens, then I mean, this should be a feast for him. And, you know, another big thing, too, with Washington is they are allowing a lot of points to quarterbacks, but they're not able to get after the passer after trading Sweat and Chase Young earlier in the season. They did have a 9-sack game against the Giants. Somehow the Packers didn't sack him once, but it seems like every team's been going off against the Giants. 0 sacks in the last 2 games. Since week 8, they've only had, besides the Giants game, they've only had 3 sacks in all their other games. And so if you give Stafford time, I mean, Cooper Kupp and Puka are going to have so many opportunities to get open. And, you know, Stafford might not be as mobile, you know, as he was, but man, he can still sling that rock. So you give him time and great weapons. And yeah, this is a great matchup.
For sure, man. So guys, good luck on your matchups this weekend. Give us a like. Give us a follow. Let me know if you played or played against Raiders D. I feel sorry or super happy for you. Or give us a like if you love Tommy DeVito's agent, just like me, the mob boss looking guy with the hat, one of my new favorite players. But good luck to everyone out there. And tune in next week if you're still in the fantasy playoffs. Tune in if you're not, but definitely if you need advice next week. Andy, thanks for coming on, man.
Thanks for having me.